Hey, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a big zchut to be able to learn with all of you tonight. Baruch Hashem, tonight we are at part 17 of our series Halichot Bat Yisrael, and it's really wonderful that we've gone through so many different areas of halacha that pertain to Jewish women. And Be'ezrat Hashem, tonight is another section that really is important to talk about, and that is the mitzvah of Ona'at. So first of all, I hope you all had a wonderful Shavuot. And Be'ezrat Hashem, the zchut of Kabbalat Torah that we accepted upon ourselves should be there for us, should stand for us throughout the entire rest of the year. We should have a full Kabbalat Torah and accept and fulfill Be'ezrat Hashem all 613 mitzvot Be'ezrat Hashem according to the halacha. So tonight, Be'ezrat Hashem, and also, of course, before we begin, I just want to dedicate tonight's learning for the complete and speedy refuah shlema of the young soldier that was wounded today, who I believe that I'm actually acquainted with. May he have a complete and speedy refuah shlema b'toch shar cholei Yisrael very quickly, and may the entire situation in Eretz HaKodesh and over here be a situation of peace, Be'ezrat Hashem, for all of Am Yisrael. So, Be'ezrat Hashem, we should hear only good news. So, let us begin tonight. Be'ezrat Hashem, tonight we have a very important topic, and that's the topic of Ona'at Devarim. Ona'at Devarim is a clear pasuk in the Torah. Ona'at is a subject that spans a very large area of halacha. Usually when we talk about Ona'at, we talk about cheating somebody monetarily. Ona'at Devarim over here is actually causing somebody to suffer, but not monetarily, but rather over here through words or through actions, causing him emotional pain, scaring him, frightening him, hurting his emotions. This is all mentioned in a pasuk that the Torah tells us this is forbidden to do. It says, "Velo tonu ish et amito." We just read this pasuk in Parashat Behar a few weeks ago. It says, "Velo tonu ish et amito." And Rashi explains, "Shelo yaknit ish et chavero." There's a Torah commandment that one is not allowed to go ahead and to cause emotional pain, distress, suffering to his fellow. That is a forbidden thing, midoraita, biblical level commandment, not to say something harmful, offensive to your fellow. And not only that, but also with actions as well. That if a person would do some kind of an action to harm, to scare, to put pain or suffering on a person, that would also be something which is forbidden midoraita because of this pasuk, velo tonu ish et amito. This is a pasuk that actually the Shulchan Aruch and Siman Reish Kav Chet tells us is more severe than cheating with money. Why? Explains the Shulchan Aruch and Siman Reish Kav Chet Sif Aleph that this ona'ah is greater, she'ona'at, that keshem she'ona'ah b'mekach u'memkar, just like there's cheating by buying and selling, if you charge too much for something, or if you mislead somebody. So kach ona'ah b'dvarim, there's also ona'ah when it comes to words, saying something that will cause somebody suffering. V'gdola ona'at dvarim, says the Shulchan Aruch, greater is causing pain through words to another person, me'ona'at mamon, then causing him monetary damage. Shezeh nitan lehishavon, because money you can always give back. V'zeh lo nitan lehishavon. But a word that was mentioned, that was stated, and it harmed somebody else, can never come back. You can never take it back. Once it was said, it will always remain with that person forever. Zeh begufo v'zeh b'mamono. One harms a person's pocket, his wallet. The other harms his body, his soul, and therefore it's a problem. So what we have to understand is that it's a very severe thing. The Torah says not to do it, and the Shulchan Aruch ends off saying, "V'hatzoek al ona'at dvarim na'na miyad." Somebody who cries out to Hashem because he was being made fun of or being insulted. Somebody said harmful words to him, and this person cries out to Hashem because of it. He will be answered right away. Hashem sees that the pain of that person, and therefore says that he will respond to his suffering when that person prays to Hashem. So it's a very, very severe thing that we have to talk about. Now, you might say, well, okay, so it's clear. What does that mean? It means that you cannot go to somebody and tell him, you are ugly, you are fat. That is a statement that will cause harm, that will cause pain, suffering to a person. That is Ona'at Devarim, which is absolutely true. It is Ona'at Devarim. To make some kind of a statement like that is absolutely something that will cause a person to feel bad. And it is in the category of Ona'at Devarim. But there are many other examples of Ona'at Devarim, which we're going to discuss Be'ezrat Hashem tonight, which you might not have assumed would be a problem of Ona'at Devarim. Now, I'll just go through the cases that Shulchan Aruch starts off with himself. The Shulchan Aruch tells us that you can never remind a person of his past deeds that he has done if he did something which is forbidden, and you are reminding him. Let's say somebody was a Baal Teshuvah, somebody that repented from what he used to do. He used to go and eat pork. He used to eat shrimp. He used to do things that he shouldn't have done. So the halacha says you cannot, it's asur, to go to that person and to say to him, you remember that shrimp you used to eat? You remember that pork? Wow, pepperoni. Oh my gosh. You remember what you used to do with that pepperoni? Or you remember those places that you used to go? You're not allowed to tell him that. It's asur midoraita to remind somebody who has changed his ways of the things that he used to do in his past, because you're embarrassing him. You're making him feel ashamed of himself. And the Torah does not allow for us to feel it, to cause somebody to feel ashamed of himself. In the same vein, the Shulchan Aruch says, particularly, tzarich lizaher beyoter. The person is commanded, very much so, be'ona'at hager, to never, ever make a convert feel bad. The halacha specifically says that a convert, if you're not allowed to do that to a regular Jew that was born Jewish, how much more so you cannot do it to a convert that was not born Jewish, and of course may have had some kind of different behavior in his past, or his parents may have behaved in certain ways. We're not allowed to remind the convert of his previous deeds in his life or of his parents' deeds. That is 100% forbidden. Because remember, a convert is 100% Jewish, first of all. And moreover, the convert is somebody that there's a special mitzvah to love that convert. So therefore, if there's a special mitzvah to love him, so then when a person does something in the opposite direction, it's a double avera as well. So the Shulchan Aruch says, ben begufo, ben b'mamono, whether it's with his body, whether it's with his money, lefi shehuzhar alav bekama mekomot. In many places, the Torah specifically mentions that a person has to deal with a convert with extra delicacy, with extra special care. So that's very important. Think about it. It says b'bnei banav shel Haman, that the great grandchildren of Haman actually lamdu Torah b'Bnei Brak. They studied Torah in Bnei Brak. Can you imagine? Their great-great-grandfather was somebody that wanted to wipe out the entire Jewish nation, and they're sitting and learning Torah. If people would go to them and say, hey, you guys, remember what your great-grandfather tried to do to us? You know who you guys come from? So that would be something which is extremely offensive, very hurtful, and that would be asur to do, of course. So this is a very important thing to realize. I'll just give an example, practical, that came up. Actually, I was listening to a conversation between the Lubavitcher Rebbe, alav shalom, and the Belzer Rebbe, may he live and be well, that's alive today. And just as an example of how careful people are in this area. So apparently this must have been 30 some odd years ago. The Belz Yeshiva had been successful in bringing certain people closer to Judaism. There were certain people that were not observant. They went ahead, they brought them to Torah and mitzvot, and they made a special learning program for them to be able to start to learn Gemara, to be able to start to learn how to function like a Jew is supposed to live, which they hadn't had that education until then. So the Lubavitch Rebbe had mentioned to the Belz Rebbe when he came to visit that he said, I noticed that you made a special place for the Baalei Teshuvah. And the Belz Rebbe said, yes. So he said, it says in Halacha that you're not allowed to remind a Baal Teshuvah that he's a Baal Teshuvah. You can't remind somebody of his previous deeds, his previous life. So he says, I am afraid that if you're making a special yeshiva or a special program just for them, then you're singling them out and you're reminding them that they are not like everyone else and they are not, that they have a history. And I'm afraid of this, what we're learning now, Ona'at Devarim. So the Belzer Rebbe responded to him. He said, but it's from a practical standpoint, I can't put them in yeshiva with everybody else that's been doing this for their whole life. How are you supposed to, they're not going to get up to par. You got to train them, individually and, or at least collectively, but, you have to give them the level that they need. Anyway, the conversation that happened was revolving around this issue, just to show as an example of just how careful you have to be in this area, that the Lubavitch Rebbe was concerned about this kind of issue being a problem. I'm not saying who was right, who was wrong. I'm just trying to bring out as an example of the issue at hand. So it's so important to make sure that this is the case. And not only does this apply to an adult, by the way. It says, Velo tono ishit amito. Amito also applies to a child. A person that causes pain to a child, a person that causes suffering to a child, is also in violation of this halacha 100%. If, let's say, a child, that your son or your daughter maybe didn't pay so much attention at school this week, and they come home with the Parashat HaShavua questions, and you go ahead and you start grilling them on those questions, and they have no idea whatsoever how to answer these questions. So that would be a problem of making your child suffer. That's something which you have to know what the rules are in terms of the limits that you have, or the boundaries that you have to put up. In other words, until when is it chinuch, and until when is it already overdoing it? This is a very important discussion that has to come up. So it has to be done. Sometimes a person has to reprimand his child, okay, but on the other hand, if you know that the child hasn't learned this week, and you grill the kid again and again and again and again, that would seemingly be a violation of this rule as well. That it would be velo tonu ishit amito. You can't just go ahead and cause the child to suffer. You can't cause him pain, or even more so. I mean, on a much more simple level. Sometimes people like to fool around with kids. They like to tell them all kinds of things to scare them, or to make them afraid, or whatever the situation may be. This is causing the child suffering. This is causing the child to be scared. That is asur to do. Velo tonu ishit amito. You cannot cause him pain. You cannot cause him suffering. That's important for us to understand. And of course, needless to say, this is how much more so when a person does this to his fellow in public, barabim. It says as I'm sure you all know, the Gemara tells us in many places, Noach lo le'adam she'apil atzmo letoch kivshan ha'esh ve'al yalbin pnei chavero barabim. It says that a person should prefer to throw himself into the fiery furnace than to embarrass his fellow in public. Embarrassing your fellow is definitely a violation of Ona'at Devarim. To cause somebody to be embarrassed, like we're talking about, you tell him, you're ugly, you're fat, or you are dumb, or God forbid, all kinds of comments that cause him to be insulted, or things that are hurtful statements, and it's done in public. So that is by far a greater sin. A person, it says, should rather die than do so. We learned that from the story of Yehuda and Tamar, where Tamar had the evidence that Yehuda had slept with her while she was disguising herself as a harlot, and she refused to go ahead and announce that her pregnancy was a result of Yehuda, her father-in-law, being with her, but rather she said, whomever these belong to, and she took out the signet ring and the staff of Yehuda, whomever these belong to him I am pregnant. And that at that moment Yehuda admitted, but she wouldn't admit, even if it meant losing her life. She would not go ahead and embarrass Yehuda publicly. And the Rabbi Yonah in Sefer Sharei Teshuvah explains that to publicly embarrass somebody is actually considered to be an offshoot of killing him. Meaning, we know that there are 3 cardinal sins that a person has to die for. A person, God forbid, is presented with 2 options. Either you go ahead and kill somebody, or you will be killed. So the halakha says he must give up his life and prefer to be killed than to go and kill somebody else. That's what the halakha demands of us. The same holds true if it's, God forbid, Gilui Arayot, which means either you commit this cardinal sin of worshiping an idol, or I kill you. Or the same thing if, God forbid, either you commit the sin of adultery, or I kill you. So the person has to prefer to be killed than to go ahead and to do the sin. So Rabbi Yonah explains that this not only holds true for the act itself, but it also holds true for the offshoots of that act. Meaning anything that is related to that act also he has to prefer to die for. And so he says when it comes to a person killing someone, so we usually are not presented with this kind of situation of killing somebody, but he says when you embarrass somebody in public and the blood is drained from his face, and this is something that will cause him to be embarrassed, it's in a sense like killing him. For that reason, Tamar had preferred to die than to publicly embarrass Yehuda, her father-in-law. So over here, we see just how severe that is too. So it's important for us to realize that we must never, God forbid, embarrass somebody. Besides for the fact that it's like killing, it's also considered to be a violation of Ona'at Devarim, which is one of the mitzvot of the Torah. And it says that somebody who publicly embarrasses his friend, chas v'chalila, en lo chelek la'olam haba. He doesn't have a portion in the world to come. Now, of course, it means you can always ask mechila, you can always ask for the person's forgiveness, and hopefully he will forgive you for what you did. So there's no problem if the person forgives you in the sense that he will have olam haba. But of course, we never want to do that. And it's also important to remember that this doesn't apply if it only happened once, that the guy did something and he wasn't thinking, he embarrassed somebody. This is something which the Rambam explains as when he's a perpetual offender. He's somebody who embarrasses people all the time. Unfortunately, in today's world, this has become a habit of many people. People make a living off of doing things like that. There are people that constantly look to embarrass other people, and there are so many platforms on which they can do this. Without realizing it, somebody could post an old video that he has of his roommate, who is now today somebody very special. He's got a roommate from 20 years ago who did something stupid, and he posts that video on who knows what, Facebook, YouTube, and the whole world is now seeing this guy that the whole world thinks is somebody very special. He's very very held up in the community, and they go ahead and they post this video, and now he looks like a very lowly person. It's a shame when such a thing happens. You're embarrassing a person, you're shaming him, you are doing something which really ruins his reputation. So such a type of a behavior is definitely embarrassing a person publicly, which is a violation, as we said, of both averot, of in a sense of killing him, and also this halakha of lo tonu ish et amito. And it's so easy for us to go ahead and to just post these videos, but without realizing it, we're actually harming our fellow very, very badly, whether it's his reputation or whether it's all kinds of different problems that we're ruining for him. So therefore, it's so important to watch out for this. So again, we cannot tell the person, Zechor ma'asecha hakodmim, remember the previous things that you used to do. You can never tell somebody how ugly you are, wow, or how fat you are, or wow, he's a gingy, right? Gingy sometimes also, if you call the guy by that name, we're going to see right now, one of the halachot is, I'll read it to you inside, Seif Hey, Siman Resh Kavchet, Yizaher shelo lechanot shem ra lechavero. One must be careful not to give a nickname that is a negative nickname. Afal pi shu ragil b'oto even though everybody calls him that nickname, even though he's used to calling him that nickname. If your intention is to embarrass the person with that nickname, it is forbidden. Many times people, because they are trying to make fun of somebody, they will land on a nickname for that person, and that nickname does not make that person feel good. It's making fun of him, and he wishes they never said that, but the name sticks, people remember it, and they go on with it. Little do they know that it's a grave violation of this halakha, a very severe violation of this halakha. It's asur to do that. It's a devastating thing to go ahead and to do that to somebody. So therefore, a person must make sure never do that. I mean, unfortunately, far too often, we hear nicknames like that about Gdolei Yisrael. I mean, really, you hear people that are calling, Rabbi so-and-so by the letters of his name. I don't even want to mention it, but, you're talking about great people, and this is what they're calling them, by the letters of the name. It's a disrespectful way of speaking about somebody like that. So that's something which is asur to do, like we just read in the Shulchan Aruch. So that's very important to understand. Another thing that I want to point out: if somebody is, God forbid, suffering, let's say, God forbid, he's going through some kind of a problem in his life. He went through some kind of a tragedy. He suffered whatever it may be, monetary loss or a relative, who knows what. All kinds of suffering is out there, God forbid. No one is allowed to go and tell him that, why you're suffering? Oh, you have to do teshuvah. Wow, you got to do teshuvah. You have to do teshuvah. You know why you're going through this? Because you're not doing A, B, C, D. Because you're not doing this and that. Because you messed up in A, B. This is a real violation of Ona'at Devarim. You're causing the person to suffer even more. Not enough that he's suffering because of what he went through, but now you're telling him, you should know the reason for the suffering is you, because you failed and you this and you that. That's a real bad thing to tell somebody. That's why the friends of Iyov, it's brought down that Iyov unfortunately went through a lot of suffering, and he lost his children, he lost his wealth, and it just out of nowhere, he lost a whole lot. This is the story of Iyov. There's a whole book in Tanakh called Iyov. And his friends decided to lay it on him thick. And they said, listen, you did this and you did that, and you lost your faith and you lost it. And a whole long thing they told him. They were punished for telling him that. Because when somebody is in suffering, he doesn't need to hear from you that the reason for his suffering is because of himself. That's the last thing that he needs to do. That's that he needs to hear. What he needs to hear is encouragement. He needs to hear chizuk. He needs to hear things that are going to help him to get through it. There's a story with the Chafetz Chaim that's coming to my mind right now, that it was Leil Yom Kippur. And Leil Yom Kippur was, there was one man who, after everybody went home from the Kal Nidrei, this guy was sitting there by the Aron Kodesh, and he was just crying, and he was just miserable. And the Chafetz Chaim saw who it was, and this was this guy that was much older, and he had never gotten married, and he just had a miserable life, and he was like a real Baal Yisurim. And it was a very sad sight. The Chafetz Chaim walked over to him, this story goes, and he sat down next to him, and he told him, he said, listen, I know that, you have a lot of Yisurim, but I want you to know that I also went through a lot of difficulties in my life. And he started to tell him that when he was younger, I believe it was his father, had to marry somebody else, had to marry a different woman because his mother had passed away, and then there were problems within the families. So in order to make Shalom Bayit, the Chafetz Chaim ended up marrying his stepsister, and he's sitting there on the night of Yom Kippur, and believe me, the Chafetz Chaim had other things to do on the night of Yom Kippur, but he's sitting there trying to just tell him, listen, but you should know everything worked out for the best, and things are going in a very positive direction. And it's something that he sat there and he really spoke to the person's heart. He started talking to his heart, and he started making him feel, just to understand what, that even though sometimes things are hard, but Hashem will help you to get through it, etc., etc. The same thing we find by Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef HaTzadik, the brothers were telling him that, that's it. He's going to kill us now. Yaakov Avinu passed away, and Yosef is going to come after us because now that Yaakov is dead, it's the time now for him to get us. And Yosef tells them, he says, no, you guys don't understand. He starts talking to them reasonable things. He says, don't you guys understand? Until now, everybody thought I was a slave, but you guys are the proof that I am here and I'm really coming from a good family. And you guys are the proof that I'm not a slave. And why would I go ahead and kill you if I'm somebody that I'm benefiting from you? If you're really my family, why would I kill you? People would say that I'm not really your brother and I really am a slave. It wouldn't make sense. And he starts to explain to them things that talk to their heart, even though he didn't have to, but he did. That's the point, that he's trying to speak to them. They're in a state of depression. They're in a state of fear. They're in a state where they're suffering from what they did in their past. And instead of going and telling them, yes, you should, because you did this and you did that, and it's your fault, etc., he says to them things that actually calm them down, that he speaks, he speaks to their heart, it says. That's the idea. That's the way of Gdolei Yisrael. Not to say to them, you need to do teshuvah. You know why you have a blister on your lip? Because you spoke Lashon Hara. You know why you have a cut on your tongue? Because you ate something treif. That's not the way to roll. It doesn't work like that. That would be considered Ona'at Devarim. It's an isur to say something like that to somebody. Okay, that's important for us to understand. Okay, let's continue. Okay. Another thing sometimes people don't know, sometimes somebody already purchased something and he comes back and he shows you what he got and he starts telling you, I got it for, I got this item. What do you think? I got it for X amount of dollars. And then people start laughing at him, says, are you serious? You could have gotten the same thing, for half the price, or that's not worth it. That's not worth that amount of money. And they start making the guy feel bad about his purchase. That's also something which is not allowed to be done. There are lots of examples of Ona'at Devarim, so I'm trying to get through as much as we can. But that's important to watch out for too. Let me read to you what the Shulchan Aruch tells us over here. This is another important halacha that you have to be aware of. It says like this, Maran Shulchan Aruch, Siman Resh Chavchet, Seif Dalin. Keitzad hu Ona'at Devarim. What is considered to be Ona'at Devarim? Listen to this very interesting case. Lo yomar lo bekama ata rotze liten chefetz ze, vehu eino rotze liknoto. Okay, so here's a very interesting situation. This guy is coming into a store. He's looking to try on clothing. He's looking at different items. He's asking the guy how much you want to sell it for. And meanwhile, he has absolutely zero intention of purchasing anything in this store. He's got no intention whatsoever of buying anything. So meanwhile, he's making the owner of the store go ahead, spend his time on him, show him things, tell him prices. And in the meanwhile, the guy has absolutely no intention of buying anything in this store. Such a thing, according to Shulchan Aruch, is a violation of Lo Tonu Ish et Amito. We have a question over here. Let me take a look. What if the owner isn't Jewish? Oh, so that's a great question. The halacha says, Lo Tonu Ish et Amito. So there are two things to know. Number one, the Isur of Ona'at applies to a Jew. It doesn't apply to a non-Jew. However, although that is true, there's another set of laws, and that's the fifth Shulchan Aruch, as they say. We know that Shulchan Aruch is comprised of 4 parts, but they always talk about the fifth part. What's the fifth part? The fifth part is Midot Tovot, where a person has to have good midot. He has to conduct himself properly. And if you know that this is something that will actually cause the guy distress, so as far as Midot Tovot are concerned, that would not be Midot Tovot. You're causing the guy to waste his time. Again, halachically, are you doing something that is asur al pi Torah if it's a non-Jew? No. However, is it correct? I would say it's incorrect because it's not Midot Tovot, number one. Number two, it could even be actually a violation of Chilul Hashem. If, God forbid, it becomes clear that you have no intention at all of buying it, and you're just wasting the guy's time, it could potentially be Chilul Hashem, which actually is a violation of halacha, where you're desecrating Hashem's name. So you gotta always remember those other issues too. Okay, so that's important to think about. Now, so over here, this person is going through the store, he's shopping, he's looking. Now, you have to understand, it's only a problem if you really know that you just aren't looking to buy a thing. Like, let's say, for example, the price range over here is astronomical. We're talking every dress here is who knows how many tens of thousands of dollars, and it's just not something you're interested in buying right now. So you're not going to buy anything in the store, nothing. It's just not going to happen. So therefore, for you to go around and waste the seller's time would be wrong. That would be lo tono ishit amito. On the other hand, if let's say you know that, okay, I have a certain price range in mind, but if I see something that really is stunning, really gorgeous, so then, I might just pull out some extra money from my pocket and make that purchase. So now it's a different ballgame. Now there's a chance that you actually might buy something here. So you're not wasting the guy's time. And because of that, it's considered to be something which is allowed to do, because being that there is a possibility you might make the purchase, so it's considered to be okay. Okay, that's very important as well. So we have to keep that in mind. Okay, any questions so far before we move on? Okay, excellent. We spoke about the idea that a person is not allowed to cause any pain or suffering, particularly, of course, to any Jew, but definitely not to a convert. Another category of people that we have to really, really watch out for are people that are an almana or a yatom, a widow or an orphan. It's brought down that Hashem really, really, really listens to the cries of a widow or an orphan. And if God forbid somebody causes any pain or suffering to a widow or an orphan, it's a severe, severe problem. It says that when they cry out because of what this person does to them, when they cry out to Hashem, the shamoa eshmat tzakato, right? Hashem says, I will surely hear his cry or her cry, because ki chanun ani, because I am gracious. In other words, it's not going to be good for the person that does harm to them. So a person that, let's say, has a widow that is working for them, or the person that has somebody who's an orphan that's working for them, or whatever the situation may be, you have some kind of a relationship and you want to put an end to that relationship for whatever the reason may be, consult a rabbinic authority. Don't just do it. There's a lot to take into consideration. There's a lot, because remember, when it comes to a widow, it's something that is really, really important to not cause her any harm, to not cause her any pain. Same thing for an orphan. You really have to treat it very delicately, and sometimes maybe not even treat it at all. You have to consult a rabbinic authority if you're allowed to do what you're trying to do. You cannot just do what you want to do to a widow. I'll just share with you a quick story about a case where there was unfortunately a woman that had children. Her husband had passed away. This was a story again with the Chafetz Chaim. And what happened was that a month, 2 months, 3 months went by. She didn't pay the rent because of the fact that she just didn't have a way to make a living, and she was living in this house, in this house that was owned by some person. And the man said to her, the landlord said to her, "Listen, I'm very sorry, but you have to come up with the money somehow, or else I can't continue to let you live here. I mean, 3 months have gone by, and I need to get paid rent, so I can't let you keep on living here." The woman said, "Listen, I understand, but what am I supposed to do? I have nowhere to go." There was no, in Radin, back in the day, 1920 something, they didn't have Section 8. They didn't have any place for the person to go ahead and to live, in a housing and urban development. So over here, she didn't have anywhere to go. And the guy said, "Listen, you have another month, that's it." And that month went by, and she didn't have any money. She didn't have anywhere to go. There was nothing for her to do. So the man literally went to the roof on top of her apartment and removed the roof from her apartment. And it was freezing and it was raining on them, and she literally lost the roof from on top of her head. He removed it, and she had to leave. So she and her family, she and her children were forced to leave that place. And they went, and it says that they found some cave in the middle of nowhere, and they had to sleep in the cave because there was nothing for them to do, nowhere for them to go. This story reached the ears of the Chafetz Chaim, and the Chafetz Chaim said, I wonder what kind of death this man will have. And surely enough, I believe it was a few weeks later, some stray dog came and bit that landlord, and that landlord was infected with some kind of terrible disease from the dog, until the point where he himself started to bark like a dog, and then eventually he passed away. Very sad. What a very sad story that was. But again, that's what it means when it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu hears the suffering of a widow. It's a real, real issue. HaKadosh Baruch Hu listens to the suffering of a widow, of an orphan. Person has to treat a widow and an orphan very delicately, because it's not something to be taken lightly whatsoever. So therefore, Kal Vachomer, especially that the Torah gives us, but not only are you not allowed to do Ona'at, to cause pain or suffering to any Jew, but the Torah specifically says not to oppress or not to cause any pain or suffering to a widow and an orphan particularly. So that's really important to never, God forbid, mess around with. If let's say a person gets a phone call from an orphan or a phone call from a widow, that you must make sure to respond to that phone call. You cannot ignore the phone call. You have to really, do everything in your power to treat the widow and the orphan with an extra special care. Okay, we have a question over here, and we will continue. Okay, we have a question. Sorry, question. What if you go to a store to try something on, not driving anyone crazy, just quickly try on, in order to know what size you are to buy that item online, on sale on a different site? Okay, so here's the thing. If you are going into the store and it's a Jewish-owned store, and there are people that are looking at you trying to make a sale for you, trying to sell you this item, so then it's wrong to do that, because what you're doing is you're causing the person who's thinking that he's going to make a sale, again, a person who owns a store and is trying to sell you a product, he is trying to make a profit for himself, for it to bring money home to his family. So he's hoping that you are going to be a customer in his store, and what you're doing is you're setting him up for a disappointment. He thinks that you are going to make a purchase, and instead, you know that you have no intention. You're just trying on this dress in order to go ahead and to and to buy it somewhere else. So if it's a Jewish-owned store, you're really in violation if that's the case. If there's a store owner there who's trying to make a sale, so then you're really in violation of lo tonu ish tamito. I mean, that's really exactly what you should not do, unless, let's say, there's nobody really there that's trying to make a sale for you. In other words, let's say that it's that there's some goyish worker that's there, and the guy who owns the store is not there, and the goyish worker could care less if you are going to buy the item or not going to buy the item. Then already, that's a different story. Perhaps I wouldn't do it, just because maybe the store owner might, come out and try and make a sale with you. It's, you're treading a very shaky and iffy kind of scenario, perhaps Isur Doraita. So therefore, I would stay away from it. Okay. And definitely, by the way, I mean, I can't even tell you. I was once listening to Rabbi Pesach Krohn. He says that some store owner told him that somebody bought a dress from the store and returned it the following day with the card of the seat at a wedding. They give you a seat, what table you're at. So with the table number in the dress. So he says this woman bought the dress, returned it the next day, and kept the card. So the whole thing was just to begin with to buy it for that one night, which, by the way, we're not talking about this now. But you should know that such a thing as an isur of ribit, that you cannot do. That's a separate discussion of besides for the fact that you're really causing suffering to the person who's selling it to you, who thinks that you're sincerely trying to buy it, you're actually in violation of giving a loan with interest. Because what happens is when you give money and you know that you're going to give back the item to return it, so you give money to the person almost like a loan, because now they have this money in their pocket. You say, you want the loan? No problem. Give me the dress and I use it for a day. And then I'm going to get back my loan tomorrow. I give you back the dress. So it's basically like a loan with interest. I know it might sound a little bit crazy, but that's the poskim call it. Anyway, so let's not get into that. That's already a big problem anyway, if it's a Jewish-owned store of ribit. Okay, so that's important to know. Ona'at Devarim comes up in so many different ways. Somebody just told me tonight that he once went to go out on a date with a girl. And the father of this girl, before he even met the girl, decides to grill him for half an hour about the sugya that he's learning in yeshiva. Can you imagine? The guy is going to this person's house. He's trying to date this girl, and the father is literally giving him a test on the subject that he's learning in yeshiva for half an hour. So first of all, the guy might not have been prepared for that test. He might end up looking bad. So that's anyway making him feel bad, feeling embarrassed. But it's that's something which, without realizing it, could be Ona'at Devarim. The Gemara in Masechet Shabbat even says that about great tzaddikim. The Gemara in Masechet Shabbat has an amazing story. There was a question that the great Rav, which was the bridge in between the generation of the Mishnah to the generation of the Gemara. Rav was the student of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, together with Rabbi Chia. And Rav went to ask Rabbi Yehuda Nasi a question, but it was in an area in Masechet Shabbat that was not what Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was learning at the time. And Rabbi Chia saw that Rav was asking a question to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was not learning that same subject that Rav was asking him about. Rabbi Chia said to him, he said, "What are you doing?" He says, "How could you ask it? Didn't I tell you not to ask our rabbi a question when he's not involved in that subject? He might give you an answer that's not a real answer. You can't do that. You can't ask him something when he's not involved in that subject." So you see over here that you have to pay special attention, even amongst the greatest of Chachamim. Can you imagine who Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was? He was the one who compiled all Shishat Sidrei Mishnah. He knew everything. But still, Rabbi Chia said to Rav, you can't just go ahead and ask him a question if he's not involved in that sugya. He might give you an answer that's not really a real answer, and he's going to end up looking bad, which would be embarrassing him. We're talking about the greatest people who ever lived, and still that's the halacha. Now you should know, I bet you're thinking right now, in that case, so can we ask our rabbis questions? So the answer is that, of course, you can ask your rabbi questions. Usually, let's say a person is a rabbi of a shul, so he'll be of the, he'll be the kind of person usually that he'll tell you, listen, of course, I'll always take your question. I'll try to help you if I can. But you have to know that if I'm not aware of the answer, then I'll look it up. I'll get back to you. And there's an assumption that he's there to help you, to try and help you with whatever situation you have. But it's not necessarily so that he's expected to know every single answer to every single question. So you have to know the relationship with that rabbi. If usually I would say a rabbi of a synagogue, he knows that people are going to ask him all kinds of questions from all over the place. And they also are aware that he might not, know exactly every single question. So therefore, there's an understanding that it's okay if he doesn't know, he'll look it up, we'll get back to you, etc. So you have to, but again, the point is to be aware that such a thing could really be a problem. Okay, let's talk about some more practical examples. We have just one more question before we move on. The question is, until what age up to is considered a yatom? That's a great question. I don't know exactly until what age a person is considered a yatom. Usually, the idea, I believe, the simple idea would be until the person can fend for himself, until the person is on his own, able to support himself. Until then, I would imagine the person still has the status of a yatom. Okay. Now, fine. It's important to know, Ona'at also applies, Ona'at Devarim also applies to actions. For example, if let's say a person doesn't allow somebody to sleep, that could be a problem of Ona'at Devarim, not necessarily through words, but rather through actions. For example, you have two roommates. One guy wants to get up and learn Torah at 5:30 in the morning when Shacharit is at 7. So this guy is going to go learn, but he has to put in his alarm on a massive loud alarm in order for him to maybe wake up. Meanwhile, the guy doesn't actually wake up, and the other roommates all wake up and they want to chop his head off. So is that considered to be a problem? We always say gezel shena. Gezel shena means you're stealing sleep, but the poskim bring down that's not really a proper term because there's no such thing as stealing sleep. If anything, it would be hezek shena, like destroying, damaging the person's sleep, or it could fall into the category of what we're learning now, which is ona'at, which is that you're causing the person pain, suffering. He's trying to sleep, and you don't let him sleep. So that's a problem. This could also come up between husband and wife. You have a lady; she wants to walk around the neighborhood at 5:30 in the morning. The husband wants to stay sleeping until 6:30, and her alarm, is going off, and the guy might wake up. So this is the kind of thing that you would need to resolve together with your roommate. You'd have to ask them for mechila. You'd have to ask them for for permission. Once you work out the situation, or the husband will work it out with the wife, or the wife will work it out with the husband, and hopefully they'll come to some kind of an agreement. But otherwise, if you just go ahead and do it and disrupt the other person's sleep, so then that could be a problem of ona'at as well, causing the person pain or suffering. Similarly, when it comes to the heat, do you want the heat on, or is it too hot? Or the air, you want the air conditioning, you want it on, or is that already too cold? So sometimes if a person just goes ahead and turns it on and the other people are suffering, so that could be a problem of ona'at. Now, usually the guidelines are like this. In the winter, we would side with the person who wants the heat on, because in the winter it's cold. In the summer, we would side with the person who wants the air conditioning on, because in the summer it's hot. That's the general rule of thumb. However, it's important for us to realize that sometimes you could really still be causing people to suffer. Even if you're technically right, but still you don't want to cause people to suffer. That would be a violation of velo tonu ishet amito. You're not supposed to oppress your fellows, not supposed to cause them harm, suffering. So you would have to address this issue with the people and come to some kind of a consensus. Far too often we have people, one guy turns on the air conditioning, one guy turns off the air conditioning. Another person, one roommate, turns on the heat, one roommate turns off the heat. And this is the kind of thing that we have to make sure that we have some kind of mutual understanding about what to do. And again, these examples come up all the time. Let's say a person blocks somebody's driveway. That's called lo tonu ishet amito. That's a real violation of this. The guy has to go in for, he has to run in to get something, and he takes up the whole street, double parks. That happened to me the other day. I was in Queens, and some lady, one of our own, of course, decides to double park, but not just double park like smack in the middle of the street, and because she has to pick something up from the house right over there. And meanwhile, I'm trying to get around her. I can't get around her because she took up the whole entire street. I honked the horn, and she's, she realizes she's there, but she, motions me just 1 second. Meanwhile, it's about a couple of minutes later, and it's just the wrong thing to do. It's just not okay. Not only is it not moral, but it's also a violation of a law. Lo tonu ishet amito. You wouldn't think that it is, but it is. As the Torah is saying, you can't do that. Can't block the person's driveway. You can't double park and cause everybody to, the whole thing to, to be messed up now. That everyone has to wait for you to get back into your car and to move. That's not okay. So that's important for us to realize too. A person cuts the line. That's also an issue. A lot of times people think that they're extra privileged, and even though there's a long line waiting to come out of the supermarket, This person just kind of walks right up and cuts the whole thing. Now, I'm not saying sometimes people make a mistake. Sometimes people don't know there's an express line, and it looks like he's cutting the line. Really, he's just going to a different line, which is an express line. That's something else. That people have to know their place. They have to know that there's an express line and this guy's not doing anything wrong. Okay, that's something else. But if the person just feels entitled to cut the line, you are causing pain and suffering to all the other people that now have to wait longer behind you. So ridiculous, but you're violating one of the 613 mitzvot. Lo tonu ish et amito. Is it worth it just to cut the? I mean, really? It's worth it for that? That's such a, in my opinion, a very silly thing to go ahead and to do. Okay, so these are all very important examples. Another important example, when it comes to causing somebody suffering through one of these pranks, I can't tell you, people like to do this all the time. They know somebody's scared of mice, or there were just a few mice in the apartment a few days prior, and everyone's still creeped out about the mice, let's say. And then all of a sudden somebody takes some kind of maybe a brush or something and rubs it on your foot, and that's it. You think that there are mice there now on your feet, and you jump up and you scream, "Oh, mice!" So that, and the guy is laughing and everybody's laughing that, oh, they scared you. They don't realize it's a violation. Lo tonu ish tamito. They caused a fellow Jew suffering. They caused a fellow Jew to be scared for a minute. That's an isur d'oraita. It's so sad. They just got themselves an isur d'oraita of causing somebody to feel bad. It's amazing. We live in a culture where this is the standard. There are programs on the radio that I remember many years ago. This is something that I once heard. They pull a trick on somebody, and they make somebody think that his own son stole money from him. And it's a whole big show on the radio about how and then they eventually spill the beans that it's not really true. It's just a joke or whatever. And then it's all good. This is something which is totally against Torah. We have a question over here. Let's take this question quickly. The question is, what about scaring someone? Absolutely. This is the same exact thing. Somebody comes out of a room and all of a sudden you go, and then you scare the person, causing him pain, suffering. Absolutely. This would fall into the category of lo tonu ish et amito, 100%. Any one of these pranks where you cause somebody suffering, I can't tell you how many times you have the young kids, they'll order a pie of pizza and they'll send it to some guy's house and they'll make him pay for it, and he never ordered the pizza. You're causing the pizza the place to make an extra pie of pizza. You're causing the driver to go all the way out there. You're causing the guy to have to pay money that he never was interested in. I mean, it's wrong on so many levels, but it's also this lo tonu ish tamito. You're causing somebody suffering. You're not supposed to do that. That's asur to do. Okay. Now, another question that we have to address is sometimes a person could suffer from an act that you did, but you really didn't mean to cause the person any suffering at all. Sometimes you have somebody that's overly sensitive. He's someone that, he or she is somebody that, you said something that really was not an offensive comment at all. You didn't say something offensive. You didn't mean anything offensive, but the person took strong offense to it. Or if, let's say, you're acting perfectly normal. Let's say you live in an apartment building and you have kids, Baruch Hashem, and they run around and they jump around, and the neighbors underneath you are not happy with the noise. But this is an apartment building where people are allowed to have their children running around and playing in their apartment, right? So again, they're offended, they're suffering because the kids are running around and they don't like that. They're upset about that. You're causing them a disruption, but excuse me, you don't have the right to be upset about my kids jumping around. That's what kids do. And if you live in an apartment building where there's the option of having families with kids, then that's what you should expect, right? Or if it's something that's really an oversensitivity that is not called for, that's something which you would not be held responsible for, because of the fact that like we said before, when it comes to a person who is going to a store and there's a chance that he's going to buy the item, there's also a chance he might not buy the item. So of course, if the person buys the item, the seller will be happy. And if the person doesn't buy the item, the seller will be disappointed. When the person decides not to buy the item, the seller will be disappointed. But did the customer or the potential customer do anything wrong? No, because she was sincere. She was going to the store. She wanted to buy something, and it didn't work out. And the seller is disappointed. But the point is that the woman did not try to harm or did not try to offend or do something to the seller. She was sincerely trying to buy something. It didn't work out. The seller is disappointed, but it was not something that was, on purpose. It wasn't. You weren't trying to make the person feel bad. You weren't going in setting the person up for some kind of a bad feeling like that. You were trying. It didn't work out. So here too, a person is doing something that is that is perfectly normal. It's perfectly fine. You can have your children in an apartment. You can have, you didn't say anything offensive, but this guy really took it to offense. So that's something which we would say is not a problem. We have a question over here. 1 second, please. What if married friends make comments to their single friends, but they don't mean to be offensive or insensitive? Similar to a woman who talks about being pregnant in front of a woman who has infertility issues. Does this also fall under Ona'at Devarim? That's a big question. So that's a very big question. You see, it's important for us to be sensitive, for everybody to be sensitive. It's important for all of us to be sensitive to each other's feelings. But, I think the reason that you might have been wondering about this question is because of the fact that, there's also a possibility of people in that kind of a circumstance also to be oversensitive. Like if God forbid somebody, is, having a problem with having children, or if somebody, is in a situation where whatever the circumstance may be, they might have an oversensitivity to it. They also have to be aware that there are people that do have children. There are people that do, get married. There are people that do very well for themselves, and this person is not necessarily doing very well for himself, or whatever the situation may be. So on the one hand, people have to be sensitive with their comments, and they have to, consider who they are speaking to. On the other hand, it's also important for the person receiving those comments to understand that, that person is in a different stage of life than me, and God willing, one day I'll reach that stage of life too. You can't expect that everybody will just, not say certain things around so-and-so because so-and-so is not in that state of, in that state of life, and that doesn't have the ability to go and do whatever, It's not fair. I mean, if you want to have a friendship, let's say somebody goes on a vacation every other week. So every other week, one day he's in Aruba, one day he's in Miami, one day he's in Turks and Caicos, another day he's in St. Thomas, and he's always traveling. So now, so I don't always travel like that. I travel maybe once every few months, let's say. But this guy, every 2 weeks, he's somewhere else. And he's on vacation, and because Baruch Hashem, he's able to go and spend however much money he wants on vacation. So, if he tells me, well, I went to, last week I was in Turks and Caicos, and last month I was in Aruba, and and he tells me about the places that he went to. He's telling me that because that's how he's involving me. He's including me in his life. He's not trying to show off to me. He's not trying to make me feel bad. He knows that I can't go around every other week to a different island in the Bahamas. But at the same time, he's not trying to make me feel bad either. So from my end, I have to understand that he's just a person. He's sharing with me what's going on in his life, which is great, and I'm happy for him. I can't feel bad. Oh well, it's too bad I can't go every other week to a different island in the Bahamas. it might be a thought that runs through my mind, but at the same time, I have to kind of keep composure and say, okay, good for him. I'm happy for him, and let him enjoy the Bahamas as much as he wants. That's it. If that person, let's put it this way, that person would not be in violation of Ona'at Devarim. He's not trying to make me feel bad. He's not trying to make me feel, hurt or something like that. He's simply including me in his life, and he's telling me what's going on. So that's the way I have to look at it, at least from my end. I hope that answers the question. Okay. Let's continue. So, it's important. I just want to end off with a couple of more points about Ona'at Devarim, and then we'll call it a night. You have to understand that as women, particularly, a woman's tears are very, very powerful. The Shulchan Aruch tells the men over here in Seif Gimel, Tzarich lizaher beona'at ishto lefi shedim'ata metzuya. Person must be careful with not causing his wife pain or suffering because her tear is around, meaning a wife sometimes can cry. Now, why is that so severe? So I'll just tell you the story that the Gemara in Masechet Ketubot Daf Samech Bet Amud Bet tells us, and that's the story with Rav Rachumi. Rav Rachumi, it says, was a big Talmid Chacham. He was learning Torah all year long, and he would come home on the Erev Yom Kippur, on the eve of Yom Kippur. And one year it says that he was so involved in his learning Torah in such depth that he simply forgot to come home. He simply forgot to come home. And it says in the Gemara, she was waiting. She was saying, now he's coming, now he's coming, now he's coming, and he simply didn't come. And his wife shed one tear. It is the moment that the tear left her eye. This is Rav Rachumi was on the roof of a building. When the tear left her eye, the building collapsed and he died. That moment. So again, did Rav Rachumi try to cause his wife pain? No. Did he try to cause her suffering? No. But it is a reality. She suffered. She had pain. So that automatically took its toll on him. Same thing, there's a story with Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana was one of the great Chachamim in the Gemara, and it says that he had asked a question to Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan was a very, very brilliant sage, and he didn't have the answer to this question. And it says that Rabbi Yochanan had his eyelids were so big that they covered his eyes. He needed to have people lift up his eyelids in order to see what was in front of him. They lifted up his eyelids. He saw Rav Kahana. Now, Rav Kahana had a split lip. And it looked, even though Rav Kahana was not laughing, but it gave the impression that Rav Kahana was laughing. That as if to say that Rabbi Yochanan, the great Rabbi Yochanan, doesn't have the answer to my question, and I'm laughing because of it. So at that moment, it says that that Rav Kahana, because of the pain that he caused Rabbi Yochanan, he passed away. Now again, Rav Kahana was a great sage himself, and he didn't mean to do anything to Rabbi Yochanan. But they say over from Reb Chaim Shmulevitz that the explanation over here is that it's a reality. It's a matter of fact. This great rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan, suffered because of him. And therefore, this is what took place. So, sometimes we really have to pay extra special care, extra special attention, not to cause somebody to have any suffering. And the last point that I want to share with you guys tonight is just one more point about when giving over tochecha. The pasuk tells us, "Hocheach tochiach et amitecha." We have a mitzvah. When somebody does something wrong, when somebody is out of line, you have to walk over to him or her and tell her that something here was a problem, and you try to correct their behavior, try to rectify the situation, that they shouldn't do that anymore. They shouldn't make that same mistake. They shouldn't commit that same avera. Of course, this is on condition that the person is going to be receptive to what you have to say. You're saying it in a nice way. You're not saying it in a mean and harmful way. So over here it says, "Velo tisa alav chet," don't bear a sin while giving over the rebuke, and explains Rashi, don't embarrass the guy. When you're rebuking him, don't embarrass him. So you have something to tell somebody, make sure that you say it in a way that doesn't embarrass the person. A lot of times people, when they give over tochacha, they give over rebuke, they forget themselves and they really shame and embarrass the person. I remember hearing a story about Rav Pam, the Rosh Hashiva of Torah V'das, where I learned. Rav Pam Zecher Tzadik D'Varcha was a master of chesed and kindness. And the story that I heard was that there was a man, I think it was Mickey Kroll, that said over the story at one of the dinners he was honored at. And he said that when he was younger, one time Rav Pam called him over. He was walking by the office of the Rosh Hashiva, and Rav Pam said to him, "Come inside for a second." And he walked inside. And Rav Pam, first of all, he complimented him. He says, "You know, your davening is so beautiful. I'm so happy to see your davening, that you're davening with such enthusiasm and such kavana." Then he said to him, "But you know, my ears started to hurt when I heard you." He says, "What? What do you mean?" He says, "You know, you're saying all the words wrong." Rav Pam was a master of dikduk. The Rosh Hashivas of Torah V'das are very big in dikduk. Like Rav Belsky Alav Hashem was very big in dikduk. So he said, you know, and he started to teach him how to say the words of the tefillah properly. So he ended off the story saying he doesn't remember what Rav Pam actually taught him, but what he did remember was the idea that before he had what to say to him, he first complimented him. He first made him feel great, and then he gave him that little bit of musar that he needed to teach him exactly how to say the words right. And from that, he learned that when you give somebody musar, you first have to build them up. You have to make them feel good. You have to make them feel happy and good about themselves, that they can achieve, that they can accomplish. And then when you have what to tell them, then they'll receive what you have to say. They'll be receptive to it. They're not going to feel embarrassed by it. And that's a very important thing to realize as well. Okay, with that, I think we can call it a night. Tizkule mitzvot, everybody. If we have any questions, we'll be happy to take them now. If not, we can, B'ezras Hashem, the nether will meet next week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, everybody. Chazakim u'bruchim. Excellent. Go to.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.